Okay, good morning or good evening, everyone. Well, it depends on what time zone you're in. Welcome to this very first Stoos Sparks. It's about storytelling today. Well, I want to give it to Donna right away.
Thanks, Sander. Stoos is a movement. For those of you that aren't familiar with Stoos, the Stoos network is all about. You'll find it on LinkedIn, and we'll give you some contact information at the end. But Stoos is really a movement toward changing the worldview on how business is done and to create better, healthier workplaces and also stewardship of the living. So it's business taking a much higher level of leadership in its role in society. The Stoos Sparks term was started by Rob Ziegler in the LinkedIn group, so we just thought we'd take off with it and create these events. And these events are really places where people like Doug Tolmie, who's our guest today, and Erwin van der Koogh, who will be coming up shortly, we'll be talking about storytelling and business in this event, as Sander said, but we're also going to be having some of the Stoos satellites will step forward with speakers. So I'll announce that one at the end of our session today on who's going to be talking in May. So we're going to do them once a month is the bottom line. So my name is Donna Jones, and my co-host is Sander Huijsen. Did I say that right?
Yes, it was close enough.
We're practicing that. I'm Canadian now in LA, and Sander is in the Netherlands, in Den Haag, and Doug is in Washington. So our two guests, as I mentioned, Doug Tolmie from Washington State and Erwin van der Koogh, who is from the Netherlands, and Den Haag is also. In this particular Stoos Spark, we don't have the capacity for interactivity, but we've got a dog participating, so I'm excited.
Yeah, sorry about that. My German Shepherd Heidi is talking to one of her friends outside, obviously.
Well, the joke is
I apologize.
You checked for cats. So anyway, we don't have interactivity on this one, but ultimately we'll be getting it and be able to handle some questions on Twitter. We're just
Heidi, knock it off.
Practiced up in this conversation. So meanwhile, feel free to support the conversation by heading over to Twitter and using the hashtags Stoos Sparks, STOOS Sparks, and hashtag storytelling, and get us out there. So thank you, welcome, and Doug Tolmie, television producer and corporate storyteller. May I turn it over to you?
Sure, with pleasure. And I, again, apologize for Heidi kind of interrupting the conversation here a little bit.
Well,
happy to be a part of this. In Washington State, I'm actually in the Everett area, which is north of Seattle. I worked in Seattle for many years as a television broadcaster and now own my own company. But for many years, I've been a person who's been telling stories in documentaries and television broadcasts and corporate videos and lots of events that I produce. And in addition to storytelling, I also teach part-time. I teach college courses in storytelling and message design, and I also work with people in organizations on how to tell their stories more effectively to produce the desired results. So I know that we're here today to talk about the power of storytelling and how we can use storytelling within our organizations to really make them a little bit more humane and more productive, and how we can actually use storytelling to kind of change the world too. That happens all the time. So I want to make a couple of assumptions, and I'm going to try to access some slides that I use in my presentations. So you're not going to see me, you're going to see my slides for a while, and then hopefully I'll be able to come back and contribute through the magic of camera here again. But let me see if I can get into some slides here, and I'll make a couple of assumptions. So, assumption number one that I make is that we human beings all tell stories. They're how we learn, remember, and teach. It's how we actually make sense of the world. It's how we connect with each other. We don't connect with each other through facts and figures. We connect through stories. One of the things that I discovered in my work as a television producer is that very few people really know how to tell stories well. In general, storytelling is not something people are taught how to do. Certainly not in this country, in the United States. We don't teach storytelling in the primary or secondary schools. Perhaps it's taught in other countries like the Netherlands, Sander, but I'm just not aware of it being taught here in the United States. Now, you can learn storytelling at the college level and in universities if you have a professor in like a creative writing or a filmmaking class who knows how stories are constructed. That's actually quite rare. So one of the things that happens is that here all of us who know how to tell stories because we're human beings, but we don't know how to tell them well, find ourselves in the corporate world, and we have to tell stories there. And there are no skills at really how to do this well. So another assumption I make is that storytelling is an art form. And like any art form, it can be mastered to a degree through learning how to tell stories and be able to design and deliver stories really more effectively. It's something then that for me can be taught and learned. So when I was a young television producer, and here I am many years ago, and I'm standing next to President Bill Clinton. I'm the guy with the clipboard in my hand trying to look like I know what I'm doing. But early in my career, I found out that we all had to tell stories. I was put into a position where I had to produce many programs and tell stories, and I didn't really know what the formula was. So I asked some veteran television producers and writers, what's the formula? How do you construct stories? And here's what I was told, that stories have a beginning, middle, and end. That's the formula. That's still used to this day. That's what people are told. And so I used that formula for years, really not knowing what it meant. And then through the process of producing lots of stories and kind of discovering and doing some research, I started to figure out that there really was a methodology in how to build stories and construct them. And so here is the formula that I use to this day. I call it the storytelling Trinity. So there's still a beginning, middle, and end. The beginning is, you could call that the challenge. Screenwriters refer to it as the inciting incident. But something happens. Something happens to change the status quo. From that, the story emerges. Now, the inciting incident could be something as dramatic as what happened in Boston last week. If you happen to be at the Boston Marathon and near the finish line when the bombs went off, that becomes an inciting incident, especially for the people who are injured. That's a life-changing major thing that happens. And millions of us throughout the world are talking about what happened in Boston right now. It's a major inciting incident. An inciting incident could be something as seemingly insignificant as raising your hand at the wrong moment in a bar, which serves as the inciting incident for the classic Alfred Hitchcock movie, North by Northwest. So once the inciting incident becomes clear, the story starts to emerge, then the middle part happens. It's the struggle. It's what happens as a result of the inciting incident. And at some point, the story resolves itself. It doesn't mean and we lived happily after. It simply means it's a new normal or a new status quo. So there has to be some sort of a resolution. And so for me, there is a methodology in storytelling. And once you get clear about that methodology, you can use that, you can teach it, and have people actually start to learn how to apply it. Now, this methodology, storytelling, works in every culture, every society on the planet. So it's something that is absolutely universal. And one of the things that happens is that in organizations, we tell stories all the time. We tell stories internally and externally. And all organizations, whether we like it or not, face challenges or problems at one time or another. And those challenges can lead to something that's called bad morale. And so I'm of the belief that behind every challenge or problem within an organization is a story that was either not communicated effectively or a story that needed to be communicated and wasn't. And all too often, stories that need to be communicated but aren't become rumors and gossip, which can spread like wildfire throughout an organization. And left unchecked, these rumors and gossip can lead to bad morale and lead to all kinds of other problems. So let me see if I can get back to myself here.
And while Doug's doing that, it strikes me that actually companies are creating their stories all the time. So if I go to Inciting Incident, I was thinking of Toyota's recall, when they had to pull back a whole bunch of vehicles. Doug, you did it.
Oh my God, it worked actually. So you see, the whole thing for me is that once I figured out how this storytelling mechanism worked, I realized that I could now teach it. I could have others learn how to discover it. And now I can go into organizations, help them get clear about whatever the problem is, and I can actually trace it back to the inciting incident. So maybe a rumor or gossip starts to happen. I can trace it back to the actual conversation that started it, or the conversation that needed to start it and didn't happen, and then we can fix it. It's almost like I've become like a doctor, so to speak, who's out there diagnosing and treating storytelling problems within organizations. But for me, it is a solvable issue, and it's a major thing that allows organizations to succeed and thrive within this modern sphere.
Yeah, completely agree. It's interesting because as organizations create their stories, they obviously many are not even aware they're doing that. An event takes place, they don't notice it, they react, they respond, mostly react, and then
Right.
and then go into some kind of crisis mode, not realizing that crisis either feeds negativity or it feeds creativity. And the question is, which one do you want to feed?
Right, right. I worked for a major television station in the Seattle area for a long time, and that television station recently got sold. I have a lot of friends who still work there. And so the rumor mill is working overtime right now at my former employer with people who are trying to find out, am I going to have a job when the new people take over? This happens all the time. And this is a great opportunity for the people, the leaders who are there, to get out there and have conversations with the employees and go, so this is the story, this is what we know to be true at this moment, and we know what you're all thinking. We know that you're thinking about, am I going to still have a job? And you can address those things. You can actually talk to people, help alleviate some fears, and start to create some stories for them that they can share with each other about what really is happening. And it's going to be somewhat chaotic here for quite some time, but actually being able to talk to people about the stories that are going on in their minds right now, these thoughts, these rumors, and being able to address them really helps to make people feel a little bit more secure and less unsure of what's going on.
Well, and it's interesting you raise that because I blogged on this topic last night, and this morning I had a comment from Ben Simonson who basically said, I've turned around cultures by listening. And so for every story that's being told, there's the whole question of, how am I hearing this person? How am I listening to this, to the stories being told? What kind of presence do I have for the people that are engaged and fully engaged in this event, and what the direction is after this, like the what happens now question, for example.
Right, right. Yeah, listening is a key component in storytelling. You're listening not only to how your audience is reacting, but you're also listening to how you're communicating. Looks like Erwin is here.
Yay!
Welcome,
Good evening, Erwin.
We can't hear you. You have to put on your microphone.
That should fix the microphone problem.
Yes.
Okay.
There we go. Cool. Sorry about
Excellent.
that. A way too interesting discussion and then technical difficulties.
Well, and coincidentally, we're now at the point where we would turn it over to you for yours if you'd care to get rolling.
Oh, cool. I was actually really it was really interesting to see the presentation sent around by Doug. Did you guys talk about Doug's the presentation yet? Yes,
I just did it, Erwin.
Oh, cool. Because what I start with in my my courses about storytelling is the structure of a story, which has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it was really cool to see you do that as well.
Yeah, and I take it just to a little bit of a different level with what I refer to as the storytelling trinity. But it's the same thing.
Yeah, and that's what I call them, the context, the challenge, and the celebration.
Good.
Good. So that's my 3 C's for you. But what I wanted to talk about is sort of the power of what it does and what I've used it for in the past. And that's basically my whole entry into storytelling started a couple of years ago as a consultant. And basically what I do is I help companies transition to agile and other like-minded frameworks and mindsets. And I basically did a storytelling course because I thought it would be funny. And what happened during that training completely blew me away during our first exercise, and I remember this clearly. It was at the point where my IT manager at a client ran in screaming. I was telling the story, and I realized that I had told this story a million times before. And that's when I realized that we tell story every single day. And that's basically what defines a culture. So that has been sort of my superpower over the last couple of years, is telling stories, being able to work with culture on a very direct level, which is tremendous fun. And so that's what I use storytelling for. And once you've sort of gotten what it does and how it works, it's tremendous. I always compare it to seeing the Matrix. If you can see the stories that are being told inside companies, and what you can do with it. And that's, I think, sort of where you're trying to get to as well, Doug, as to the if you change the stories being told in a company, you change the entire fabric of that company.
Correct.
What I wanted to talk about was what's been very helpful to me, beside what you call the story telling Trinity, and what I call the connect, the context, the challenge and celebration, is the different types of stories that are being told. And I've sort of gotten the 3 different kinds of stories. And there's a little bit of overlap and thing, but what I see is 3 different types of stories. There's teaching stories, and teaching stories are very useful to transfer experience. What you have is transferring knowledge is easy. Well, it's relatively easy compared to transferring experience. Knowledge is facts, and it's rules and processes. It's the capital of Albania is, I don't know, it's probably Albania too. But
Tirana, but that's okay.
There you go. That's the one. I keep forgetting that one. But that's sort of what knowledge is, and experience is the gray parts compared to the knowledge black and whites. It's when to follow the rules and when not to follow the rules, when to deviate, and what do you do when the rules or the processes don't work. And that's what teaching stories are. So that's one whole category of stories, and Xerox has done an awful lot with this. The copier machine company. Right? What they do is they have their training and their manuals, and they have their processes and instructions as to what to do when something goes wrong, and then they have this entire different system where they collect stories from maintenance guys as to what happened on a job. And that's what I love, right? There's the knowledge, and that works in most situations, and then there's the experience as to what happens if this is not enough anymore. So that's one part of the type of stories that you can tell. One other part that I really love is value stories. Mm-hmm. What are your values personally, but also on a company level, right? Stories are about a challenge, obstacles, and basically what values are things you stick to, regardless of what is obvious or common or accepted or logical. I always give the example of a company that I worked for. I worked with on storytelling, and one of their values is being great for their employees. So they had this situation where one of their employees couldn't do anything there was no client for him for a couple months, and then this client came along 200 kilometers away. That's 140-ish miles. Mm-hmm. Right, and this was a dilemma for them, right? There was a customer, and there was someone they could hire out to that customer, and that's what stories are. What do you do in this particular situation? And that's what I like about the value stories. Instead of saying that you're trustworthy or that you're good for your employees, how about you base that in a couple of stories? Right, and this is what I love about value stories, being a very powerful supporter of your values. Right, and that's the second part story, the value stories, and basically you should, with every value that you have on your corporate website, you should be able to find a couple of really interesting stories about when you stuck to that value, it made a difference, or even if you didn't, if you did not stick to your value, how you learned from that and you regret it. Right? So those are really powerful stories.
So, Erwin, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt your story, but could you give an example of a story that would, convey a value of a company? Do you have a real life example?
Oh yeah, I have plenty. The story I was talking about earlier is One Such Stories, and basically what happened. I was at a client, and my company I was working for at the time really valued exchanging knowledge and exchanging experience. So we had bi-weekly meetings with all of the consultants at the office. And I was at a new client, and it was Tuesday at 3, and the meeting starts at 4, so I had to leave. And so I get up to leave, and I say goodbye, and I walk past the IT manager's office, and I wish him a good evening and go on my merry way, when he literally runs after me and yells over the hallway and screams, "Where the hell are you going?" So I turn around and go, "Well, I'm going to my company's office. Right? There's a knowledge exchange meeting every other Tuesday. You know this. It's in the contract." And I was like, "Well, you can't leave." And I go, "Well, it's not a matter of wanting to leave or should. It's what I should do, right?" So off he goes, and he says, "Well, let me call Dan." Dan is the owner of the company I work for. So being the cheeky bastard that I am, I take up my phone and I'll save you the trouble. I'll call him. So I call up the owner of the company and explain the situation. That the client doesn't want me to go, and that I really should be leaving now. So he says, "Give the phone to the IT manager." So I give the phone and wait. And as the IT manager is talking on the phone, you can sort of see this sly grin developing on his face, and so when the smile is completely and properly finished, he hands me back the phone, and he says, "Dan wants to talk to you." So I take the phone and I pick it up, and when I say hello, Dan, and the only question he asks is there an urgent production problem right now? And I go, nope. And he says, great, I'll see you in an hour. And he says, hand me back to the IT manager. So I hand him back the phone. I get the pleasure of seeing that sly slowly disappearing from his face when he hears the news that I am going to be leaving. And that's sort of the essence of a value story. Is the owner of this company, who's responsible for a lot of other things, but among which paying my salary, is willing to lose a client, right, over the knowledge exchange meetings. And normally, in regular companies who say that they are dedicated to exchanging knowledge, would have given in this particular situation, and they would have said, well, you're right, it's busy, and there's a lot of work to be done, and we can miss Erwin this particular Tuesday. But that's when you get on that slippery slope, and it's not really value anymore. So this particular value was very was lived, right? And that's sort of the value that you have, is we work on our knowledge and our experience as a company, and that's more important than a client.
I know Patagonia's got a ton of stories like this that would really demonstrate places where they stuck to their principles of stewardship and sustainability, and it challenged every aspect of their operations, but they stuck to it. So thanks, that's a great story.
Yeah, and that's what I like about them. Is the other thing that's great is that I've told this story a million times, but colleagues of mine who I've told the story to have told the story to people. And the funny thing was, this was the particular story I was talking to about earlier when I said that in my training, this is a story that made me realize that I was telling stories. And the funny thing was that the teacher who was teaching that particular story had heard this story from the owner as an example of what he wanted more of. So it also shows you how powerful, how good stories can just travel, even beyond your immediate surroundings, and that's what I've used to a lot in my work as a consultant, is get stories to spread. And I can tell you how funny it is to hear one of your own stories being told to you, them having no clue that it originated at you, which you can then pass and say, that's a really interesting story. I think he should know that as well, and point out to some managers somewhere.
Well, Erwin, you identified two of the types of stories that I help people and organizations tell: the teaching stories and what I call the values and action stories. There's three others that I work on that I think that you probably work on also, and they're the who I am story, which means if you're a leader, you have to be able to state to the people that are with you, this is who I am, these are the values and virtues that guide my life and kind of what I'm here to do. There's also the why I am here story, which really works well within new groups or organizations, and somebody new has come in there and everybody's kind of going, why is that guy here? Is he here to take my job? You know, you need to be able to answer that. And then the third one that I kind of touched on earlier with my old company that's now going through massive change is I know what you are thinking story. And I use the example of, here's my old company being taken over by a new company, and everybody who is there is wondering, am I going to have a job tomorrow? And having a leader stand up at that moment and go, I know what you're thinking, you're worried about your jobs, here's what I know to be true, tends to silence some of the really major concerns that are out there and helps them start some new stories that'll be far more positive.
Yeah, and I think you missed the last one, which is the most powerful story by far, which is the vision story.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And basically, how I see it, how I am, what do you call it? The who I am. I see that as a particular value story. It's about my values. Sander, your mic is on. I got an echo. Yeah. So yeah, there's the list I will go with the. So I see them basically as variation on the value story for the who I am, the vision story as to why I'm here, and I know what you're thinking is sort of the teaching story, as because you've taught this, you've seen this in the past, but yeah, they're so I see them as variations of the major ones, but they're very particular types of stories. I completely agree. I do want to stress the vision story though, because the vision story is the ones, it's the spectacular ones that you hear about in the news that we still talk about 50 years later. Right there, the Martin Luther King speech. There's the JFK put a man on the moon. It's the Abraham Lincoln Gettysburg Address. Those are the big, huge stories, even though they can be very, very small, that literally change the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and as an example of that, when I look at, like currently with Jeremy Rifkin's latest book on the Third Industrial Revolution, he talks about the role of narrative, the important role of narrative in changing policy and changing how we think about things. So the vision story that's embedded in that has to do with, imagine, instead of getting an electricity bill every month that is exorbitantly high, you're getting an electricity check for selling back your power to the power grid. In other words, it's a complete shift in thinking around how we absorb and how we work with energy. So there's a narrative that's fundamental, and I think it's a vision one, if I understand how you're talking about this.
Yeah, certainly.
It's one that has to do with here's a vision for how we can operate using energy as, by generating our own power. And you could do that for food as well, for that matter. So.
Yep. That's exactly the type of vision stories. It's describing what the world will be and what the world will look like, and even more importantly, how you fit in there as an audience, which is perfectly done in your energy example, right? It talks about how it affects you as a person, and that's what makes them so extremely powerful. And if you look at the Martin Luther King speech, right, he describes what the world will be if we have equality. Mm-hmm. I love the quote by Simon Sinek about this particular speech, because what he says about it, Martin Luther King said, he didn't say I have a plan. Mm-hmm. What he said, I have a dream, right? And that's what makes them so powerful. It's not that you have all of the steps and the plans. It's just that there's a vision there, and we should go there. And we don't know exactly how we're going to get there. We don't know. There's a lot of conflict because the world isn't like that, but we're sure we're going to overcome them. And it's the same with what JFK did with the put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. They had no clue how to do that. They absolutely had none. There was no plan that they could take out. But what his talk did was inspire a lot of people who then made the plan and made sure it was achievable. And that's why vision stories in my book are by far the most powerful stories out there.
They're also one of the more difficult story to construct as well, Erwin.
I was about to tell you, it's also one of the, by far the most difficult. One of the tips and one of the tricks that I also always teach in my courses is to tell personal stories, the ones that happen to you, because it'll be much more powerful, because you can go back to that particular moment, feel the emotions you felt, describe the scene that happened, and it's very easy to tell a pretty good story, or even a very good story, with very little effort. The problem with vision stories is because you cannot easily describe what the world will look like, that does make it harder, as certainly the really powerful ones. Yes, I completely agree. They're by far the hardest to tell.
But not impossible, and that's where training and being able to figure out how to make it work comes in.
Yeah, and most of them aren't actually very, very hard. One of my favorite ones I've used, which was fairly easy, is describe. It was easy. It was a bank. It was a big bank, and they had crappy tools for software development. And the only thing I did was describe to people what the life of a developer would look like if they finally got some decent tools in, which happened to be saving them a couple million euros a year. And that's sort of the bite that makes it stick in people's mind. But yeah, those can be. They don't have to be huge and big.
Right.
What will it look like if we've made this change? It means that we instead of paying a check, we get a check. So there's nice little shortcuts but they don't have to be the JFK or the Martin Luther King speech to be effective.
To bring this together now, can I ask go to Doug? I mean, Erwin, you've just given a tip that you offer. Or Doug, what tip would you offer to those who are business people who are listening to this and like to improve their way of story?
One of the things that I always focus on when I get involved in a new organization is I ask first, tell me what your mission statement is. Help me understand why you're on the planet Earth. And then I ask, I know it sounds basic, but very few people can tell you what their mission statement page of stuff.
We will work with our stakeholders, and we love our employees, and yeah.
So I ask them, speak from your heart, why are you here on the planet Earth? I actually phrase it that way. And it gets them to get in touch with why their organization is there. And then I go, so does that map on with why you're on the planet? So if there's alignment, you're actually in a good organization. Now, what can we do to help you tell stories that validate this mission? And are your stories validating this? If they're not, may I suggest that we may want to have you work on that and figure out ways to have them validate that. It's going to make you feel better internally. It's going to communicate very clearly to your clients and stakeholders that this is why you're on the planet and this is the service and or product that you're providing. So that's where I start, Don, is that I really start first with why are you on the planet, what's your mission statement. From that, wonderful, great stories emerge, or I can identify the stories that are not working that really need to be there to help validate that.
Right, exactly. All right, I'd like to bring this to a close so we don't make this video too long for those who are watching. Any parting thoughts from Erwin or Doug?
No, except to just get started and get practicing. Realize that you are already telling tens of stories a day. It's the only thing we're trying to get you to do is to tell better ones.
Right. It is an art form. You can learn how to do it. I think that it does require training from people like me and Erwin and others who do this stuff, but you can learn how to do it. And once you learn how to do it, you'll discover the power is something that you'll never want to give up.
Oh, no.
I, for one, am excited because it feels like I can be taught. You know, this is not one of my strong areas, so I've learned a lot already. And even though I've written a feature film script and all that sort of thing, and I look at it and go, you know, I just don't think I can tell a story that way. So yeah, I've learned a lot. on behalf of both Sander and myself, I want to thank you both for coming on the program today and taking your time. We've had a couple of dry runs. We've experimented with Google Hangouts, so we're learning a lot. And I really want to thank you both for learning with us as we embark on this journey called Stoos Sparks.
Thank you for having me.
I also want to ask people to comment on the channel, give us some constructive feedback, please. We're in progress here. We're going back and forth. And when you go back after you finish watching this video, ask yourself, what stories are you telling in your organization that are not aligned with that purpose, as Doug said? And what, where is the energy going? There's an old shamanic rule that says energy flows where attention goes. So where's the attention going, and how can you shift the direction of story to become more aligned with what you really want to accomplish? And the other thing that's important to notice personally is what stories are being told that hold things in place. The ones that keep cycling around and around and around, but they're not really going anywhere. They don't have a purpose. They're not really engaging and or providing a sense of direction. So by observing those, you get a better grip on where these stories are sitting around and what they're doing and how they're serving, and then you can take it from there. I'd like to hand it over to Sander, because Sander's done some great work on where to find this information and where to go for it. And we've got a speaker coming up in May. We're going to do these once a month, as I said. Our speaker in May is a speaker sponsored by the San Francisco Satellite and David Chilcott. I'm not sure about the title, but it could be around Agile Conversations. Sander, can I ask you to explain to people where to go for information on upcoming?
Well, first of all, of course, we have the LinkedIn group. Just search for Stoos Network. We will be posting updates about Stoos Sparks, of course, there. This video, if you're not watching it already, on stoos.nl/stoos-sparks, but we'll post that as well in the LinkedIn group. And of course, we have the Stoos Sparks channel on YouTube. So there's plenty of options to find us, actually.
Great. Thanks very much. We'll see you at the next Stoos Spark.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.